I'd like to welcome everybody to our New Tracks meetup tonight. Really thank you so much for coming. Hope you enjoy the meeting. I think you will. And I hope you come back often to see what we're doing. If any of you are new for tonight and have not done so, I hope you'll go to our newtracksmodeling.com webpage and register. That way you'll get automatically receive an email that's a private email, as I understand it, for each of the shows and for the train show as a reminder. And it'll save you wondering about what's happening and when we're doing things. So it's newtracksmodeling.com on the website. The next My Bill after this is December the 12th. So if you'll make a note of that date, that will be the next time that we get together and talk about each other's modeling and what we're building. So tonight we are having you and your modeling as the featured modeler. We're really looking forward to this. It was very successful the last time we did it. In fact, we had more modelers than we had time for, and we apologize for that. But Chris is doing a great job moderating it, and I will turn it over to him now and see if we can't get this show off the road. Chris?
Thanks, Jim. A couple of housekeeping things is at 8:30, I'm going to have to go because I was in trouble last week. I didn't get the 10-year-old in bed in time, and you don't want to deal with that.
Don't worry, you got me here. I'll make sure we back you up.
Well, thank you, Dylan. So let's see. We had a tale of 3 Pauls last week that none of the 3 of them got the opportunity to go. I see Paul Vaughn on here. So we're going to start out with him. And I don't think we have any of the others that had asked to present, but then
I should be on here.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Okay. So you'll be you're Paul Thompson?
Right.
Yep, there it is. Okay, I got you. All right, so you'll be number 2. And then we'll have Bob come up as number 3, and then Phil Richard come up as number 4. So would like to now turn it over to Paul Vaughn. Thanks for everybody coming, and it's up to you, Paul.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
I got a notice up in the upper left corner of my screen. It says, will you allow one.live.com to use your microphone? What's that all about? Allow or don't allow?
I wouldn't allow it because it doesn't make any sense to me what it's asking.
What's asking for it? If it has anything to do.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. But many programs that need to use audio will ask for permission to get to the microphone.
Are we ready?
Yes, indeed.
Do I hit screen share?
Yeah, down in the bottom, there's a share screen. You click on that and then pick whichever screen you want to share.
Okay, now I hit this down here.
Yes.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Oh, good. This is my build. I'm Paul Vaughn. This is one of my ON30 rebuilds. I'm putting a new roof on it, a new cupola.
Very nice.
This is a critter that I'm making for ON30, which this one happens to be resin cast, and the cab is 3D printed, and the frame's 3D printed. The side frames are Athearn. The trucks are Athearn.
Very
This
nice.
is my ON30 plug door boxcar on a Bachmann boxcar frame. I made new ends, new roofs, and used a HO 62-foot car and cut it, then added the channel at the bottom and put S-scale ladders on it and S-scale brake wheels. But it turns out to be a nice 25'6" ON30 car.
Route of the Dashing Turtle?
It was a decal set that I ran across in a hobby shop. I thought I liked it, so I bought
I love it.
decals.
Nice.
This
I
is
love it.
an American Flyer flat car that had holes in it. And I filled in the holes, made a attach point using a 256 nut and screw, then filled in the rest of it with resin to encapsulate the screw. And then this is a set of trucks that I printed on 3D. But basically it's a American Flyer flat car that I rebuilt. It's a metal flat car. Makes a 30-foot, 6-inch car in ON30.
Did you design the trucks on a CAD program, Paul?
No, a friend of mine did.
Ah,
And you can get those trucks at the website, his website.
oh, okay.
I print the trucks.
I
We
got
have
you.
a problem with the trucks. The bar at the bottom of the trucks between the journal and the bolster is too thin and it's very fragile. So we're going to beef those up, make them thicker. And then this is, believe it or not, a American Flyer red caboose.
Hmm.
I cut it off at the rivet, horizontal rivet row at the top and added underframe and added my K27 steps on it and S-scale brake wheel and to make it look appropriate for ON30. So the width of the American Flyer stuff is almost identical to the Bachmann width on the cars, so you can use it. Or if you don't want to, you can put S-scale trucks underneath it and run it on S-scale as a shorty hopper. The decals for Mud Bay and Western happen to be N-scale decals, except for the number and the reporting marks.
Huh.
This is a car we're coming out with. This is a Denver and Rio Grande 10A side dump car adjusted for ON30 for a Bachmann frame. And this is 3D printed. The trucks are 3D printed, and that's an 802 on the coupler. The deck is also 3D printed. Just thought I'd like to share that. Any questions on that? Okay. This is a 3D printed. The photograph is the Tacoma Rail work flat, and the dimensions on the work flat were taken based upon the axle spacing of 5'6" on the real trucks, and we came up with this length. And this is all 3D printed car, except for the end beam. I cast that myself. So this will be coming out with too. This is a Nevada Canyon Air Gauge ON3 flat with ON30 trucks. You can see that the frame was all 3D printed as one piece on the top view, and I added the deck to that frame to make the car. But all the truss rods and everything else are all 3D printed, including the frame.
Are the boards strip wood?
They're individual boards.
Nice.
They came off of Brian Ellaby's wharf. They're 2x12s in S. I just glued them together on the backside, on the non-viewed side, and put them into length after I cut them to length, and then sanded them.
And that's ON30 car now?
Yes, all these are ON30. This is my version of the Santa Fe M190, suitable for ON30, as I'm making it. This is a motor is going to have two trucks or underneath. It's an articulated drive. What? Somebody said something?
I think it was background noise. Somebody was just asking
Okay.
Phil something.
But this is one that I did. You can see the under frame for the trailer there. The three trucks will all have the Bachmann passenger car truck side frames. These are the two gray are the masters that I made I'll say section, A section, as you can see on the, what can I do? These two parts, you see the arrow? Can you see
Yeah.
the arrow?
Yeah,
Okay, these two parts were cast off of these two parts, and all the windows except two were filled in with resin.
Hmm.
And this is a casting off of the front one, and these are strips. This is a cast roof off of the Bachmann unit. I'm cut up HO U25C trucks to match the axle spacing on the Bachmann passenger ON30 passenger car trucks, and putting them back together. One of the reasons for the holdup of the construction. This shows you the frame. This piece here is off the original car. This is my cast front, and this is the back wall. I cast it. This is all styrene. As you can see here, this is one casting that I had off of a Plymouth, and this is the Bachmann front. This shows you how it looked going together. And notice that I put a snowplow on the front of it. This is a half of a styrene tube. This shows you with the door openings. Again, all put together. Now this section here was cut out of the Bachmann combine. As you see, the Bachmann car is wood, and I needed to match the front unit and the trailing unit as metal. And you can see that. Notice there's a gap up here I had to fill in. This is a roof made out of two castings of the original car. And notice I put in metal underneath the windows here out of a resin casting. And this is a Bachmann 20-foot frame made out of a 25'6" frame. You can see here where I knocked off the original needle beam, and then I moved it, centered it to this location after I chopped out 5 feet of it. This frame is now 20 feet long. And that's what I've been doing.
oh, let me, before you leave that, let me ask you a question. The body for that, is that an O-scale body?
It's all Bachmann bodies. Bachmann passenger car bodies. And the lead unit came off of that 4-axle twin Bachmann unit.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about, the rail bus.
Oh, the rail bus, that's it.
So
Okay,
what scale would that be, Paul?
It's all ON30.
All right, but let me ask my question again. The body, forget the frame and motor and all that, the body itself, is that O-scale body?
Yes, ON30 body. It's the same body as Bachmann for ON30s.
So yeah, it does fit for O scale. Okay.
Okay, so if I put an O-scale truck under it and frame under it, I'd have an O-scale model.
Well, it's already an O scale model.
It's
Jim.
already an O-scale model.
Okay,
You're talking about making it standard gauge, Jim?
Yeah,
The only-
I duplicated the passenger windows. I made a copy of it, and then I filled in the windows all except for two. One window on each side. The rest of them were all filled in. Then to make the roof for the longer combine section, I took two of the things that I made
Where's that?
for the roof and put them together to make the length.
Jim, it would probably be too small for an O standard gauge.
yeah, that's what I was wondering. I just,
Yeah, to make it for O scale standard, you probably have to make a wider body for it,
okay.
at least.
That's right. Yeah.
Let me ask you, because I don't model ON30, I'm just curious. When you say ON30, I've always assumed that from the frame up, that was a legitimate O scale standard gauge body. Am I wrong?
Yes.
Yes, you are
Yeah.
wrong. Narrow gauge body.
So it is going to be narrower, Jim.
And narrow
So
gauge is shorter and wider, or narrower.
So it would be the equivalent of an ON3 body? Would I say that?
Close, yeah.
So really, when it's ON30, what we're really talking about, the body is a narrow gauge body of O scale. So let's say ON3. And
Similar,
then,
yes.
and then from that, you put in an HO mechanism.
That's one way of putting it.
That's one way you could do it, Jim. The dedicated ON30 mechanisms are are proportioned better to O scale. There are some, like I had a consolidation built on an HO scale chassis that some of the parts just scale some parts to it will scale nicely into O scale. But other things like small locomotives, like say a Porter, like what you would see the Bachmann ON30 Porter, those wheels don't necessarily scale nicely, so you have to make like a dedicated wheel for it so it looks right.
But the mechanism itself, the motor, the gears, all of that is HO. And then you may have to rescale drivers on a locomotive, but for passenger cars, freight cars, what you're really doing is putting an ON3 body on an HO chassis.
Well, HO width at very least.
It's HO gauge, but you don't put HO trucks under it because then you'd have trucks that are 2 foot something long. So it's all O scale, but it's either modeled after 2 foot, 2.5 foot, or 3 foot, according to whatever Bachmann got the catalogs of. So it's O scale. Doors are O scale, seats are O scale, but it's a lot narrower. It might be only 6 foot wide. And the trucks are only 4 foot long, not 5'6" like a standard gauge. The wheels are smaller, et cetera, et cetera. But it's O scale. It's not, the only thing HO about it is the gauge.
Narrow gauge car builders did not have a standard, so I mean, if you say ON3, that doesn't really apply to a car width or even a car height, as well as when you say ON30. So each narrow gauge builder for different reasons would do a 6 foot car, 6'6", or a 7 foot car, depending on what the specs were called for what he was building.
Well, I work in ON30 and I build in ON30, and the width of your car is about 7'3", with about a 7 to 7.5 foot height on box cars. And I scratch build many of those cars. So that's what you go with, but you get your ON30 trucks and then they just fit right on HO track.
When you say ON30 trucks, am I buying HO trucks?
No,
No, they're a little bit larger. They're to scale in O scale. So they're a little bit bigger. They're 3'6" truck in length.
Well, I've really learned something tonight because I thought ON30 was basically just taking the HO mechanisms from the frame down and putting a larger body on it that was, I guess, ON3. At least that's the conception that I have of ON30.
ON30 is basically 30-inch rail, I mean, between the rails, and the trucks are a little bit larger. You have 24-inch wheels in O scale compared to 36-inch wheels in HO.
Are the frames the same HO and
No.
ON30?
No, they're not. They are bigger because you are working in O scale.
So then really, what are we using from HO? We're not using any of the HO. We're using an HO motor, HO gears. We're not using any HO wheels. We're not using any side frames. We're not using anything except the motor and gears from an HO model. Is that right?
And the track.
And the track with the HO motor. So
Track's different.
Yeah. Yeah, the ties on the
Really don't have an HO motor.
are farther apart than what the HO would be.
Jim, about 10, 15 years ago, the beginning of ON30 being popular, before Bachmann, we were scratch builders and kit bashers. And HO was our main source of power and plastic and wheels. So it did start by just the way you're describing it, by using HO mechanisms, HO wheels, trucks. But along came Bachmann and things just have been getting better and better since then. Now there's a lot of manufacturers specifically doing ON30 from the get-go.
So really this is, ON30 has matured into almost a fine scale by itself.
Well, let's say it's a scale by itself.
Okay.
There's
Anybody but Bachmann actually building in a scale ON30
I am.
besides you and Bachmann?
Well, I do too. It's a question of the biggest problem you run into, like when you say, like, let's say I do a kit locomotive, and Fran has done them too, so he knows just as well as I do. Sometimes you have to for a small locomotive, like a really tiny one, you have to repurpose a small HO scale mechanism. Other locomotives you can find something bigger for that looks better in O scale. One of the things I have learned is that, and this is from many people I've talked to, many people who have drilled it into my skull, is just because it says HO scale on the box doesn't necessarily mean you can't find another use for it. And that's what a lot of ON30 guys did when we didn't have Bachmann, we didn't have Haskell, we didn't have any ready to run anything. A lot of them would find something that just worked, and they worked from there.
MMI imported ON30 engines along with their ON3s, mostly Rio Grande prototypes. Also, San Juan sells their ON3 cars with ON30 trucks.
So
So
there's Acticraft.
Yeah, Acticraft AMS.
So really what I hear is I need a Bachmann mechanism that they sell for ON30, and then I can build an ON3 body and put it on that Bachmann frame and side frames and wheels, and I've got an ON30. Is that right?
That's one way of doing it. There's more. The ON30 is one of those scales that people have had to learn how to improvise, because as many running engines are out there, there's so much variety in narrow gauge that you have to find something to at least get close. A good example I can think of, if you looked up the Lawndale Railroad out of South Carolina, I think, or it might have been North Carolina. If I'm wrong, Larry will hit me.
The Tweetsy.
The Tweetsy is another one, but I'm thinking the Lawndale, because when you looked at they had two consolidations that I'm aware of. They had some engines before that, but the ones that I've seen photographs of were these consolidations built by Vulcan. Well, by all standards, they should have been 2-foot gauge engines. They were just that tiny, but they built them to 3-foot gauge. You see the same thing with like some of the Argent lumber engines that you could argue, hey, that should be a narrower gauge, but they built it to 3-foot because that's what the track they had was. There's just so much variety with narrow gauge. I mean, that's why a lot of us that model in narrow gauge love it. There's no one wrong answer, and there's no one right answer either. That's the beauty of it.
For ON30, are there standards, building standards?
Like what? Are
Not
you
different than O scale.
building, or are you talking about
Rolling stock, are there standards for width, height?
No.
No, there's not. The standards for narrow gauge were so all over the place that there's really no one standard in ON30.
Gotcha.
Perfectly, a good example when you look at Bachmann's 10-wheelers that they built that were copied after one of the Tweetsy engines. Those are basically ON3 width. They're very wide compared to some of the other ON30 engines that are out there. They're like, I think when I measured it was like 56 millimeters was the width from cab side to cab side on the outer edges. It was something like that. And then most of the Bachmann engines are anywhere from 40 to 45. I'm not sure on the consolidation. I've never measured that one, but most of them are like 40 to 45. When
the
you look,
Bachmann outside frame consolidation is wider than a 10-wheeler over the cylinders, and I had to redo my station platform clearances so I could run that locomotive by the station.
okay, like I said, I haven't measured a consolidation, so that's good to know.
Yeah,
So
I
that
use
outside
that.
frame stock consolidation is a very heavy locomotive, and it pulls like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot from you guys. I had no idea about any of this. So thank you so much.
and I think there's a different look on this. Forget anything you've ever learned about standard gauge. If you're going into narrow gauge, and toss it off the cliff. Because you will find prototype narrow gauge equipment that runs from being 6 feet long to 40 feet long. From being 3 feet wide to being almost 8 feet wide. So there was no standard in narrow gauge. It was whatever the company wanted to purchase and whatever would fit into the space that they needed. So if they were going into there's narrow gauge that runs in through, I've seen some in a hospital before. So it had to fit down the hallways of a hospital, into mines, into munitions plants, into almost any space they could fit it into. We tend to think about the Colorado narrow gauge or the White Pass because they had big locomotives, but the majority of narrow gauge was very small industrial lines, a few miles long, with very limited equipment, 2-3 locomotives at tops, maybe 20 cars, and that was it.
Well, right now you have Chile at meter gauge, and they're running full-size diesels, 10-foot wide diesels on the meter gauge tracks, and it looks really funny.
That's another example. Like Larry and Fran and I are trying to get at, narrow gauge does not have a set standard because narrow gauge was basically custom. It was built to the requirements of the railroad. It was built to the requirements of what was needed for operations. Talking to, say, the guys up in Maine, their passenger cars are the same width as a 3-foot gauge passenger car, but they ride on 2-foot gauge trucks. So if you sit in a Sandy River passenger car, the interior width is the same as, say, a car in the Cumbres and Toltec, which I know they looked at buying one from them because they were getting rid of a spare car. They're like, ooh, we could throw trucks under that. At least that was the rumor that they were kind of talking about it, and they had asked questions about it, and like, nah, we're thinking too much. But it's the same idea. Narrow gauge is weird, and that's why people who model narrow gauge are like ON30 love it, because like I said, there's no one right answer and there's no one wrong answer either. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah,
Logistics,
You don't need no stinking rules.
logistics
sells
for
that-
manufacture of narrow gauge must have been fairly wide then. Were there any particular manufacturers that would make cars in any gauge that you could go to?
Pretty much anyone that made freight cars. Like one of the things to remember when it comes to a lot of these builders, like Baldwin, like say ACF, Pressed Steel, Pullman, Jackson Sharp. Now there may have been some standardization for the standard gauge line because there was so much of it. But if somebody from a narrow gauge operation showed up and said and was waving the money around, yeah, they'd build whatever they wanted. You know, you might have some, there might be some common design features between the different narrow gauge designs from like Jackson and Sharp for their coaches. They might use like common fittings or something like that. Maybe similar architectural schemes. But for the most part, they're going to build what they're paid to build and they're just going to roll with it. They're just like, hey, we're getting paid to do it. Who cares? Let's make the money.
Well, EMD built DDM 45s. They took a SD 45, put it on DD trucks, regauged it to meter gauge, and they ran 89 of them in Brazil on meter gauge. Full width diesels running on meter gauge tracks at 70 miles an hour.
Just need good track work.
Then you get the Mount Gretna 440 came out of the Baldwin catalog. There was the Mount Gretna was the only such 440 built in the United States, but they're all over the rest of the world, and they don't look like the one behind me. Got little beady drivers on them, and they're really tiny locomotives. But they were sold all over the world for every gauge you can imagine, including, by the way, 5'6". So it's whatever made money. As Mr. Dillon has been, yeah. There might have been the same fittings that went in a standard gauge car for the ends of the planks that made up the seat, but the planks that made up the seat were totally different.
You reminded me of something, TC. In Chile, they have from Santiago north, it's meter gauge. From Santiago south is 5'6" gauge. And they run full-size equipment.
Then when it comes to like some of these narrow gauge operations, like in Europe, I think, or it might be from Spain, because Spain is wider going into the European network. They even designed some trains at the trucks. You stop over a special set of equipment and it regauges the wheels so you can run on the European network. And the idea is just so you can run right through instead of having to change trains. They do it in Switzerland with the meter gauge. I think they do it with some of the other meter gauge lines in France to an extent. Instead of just putting a car, transloading something to another car, they've just kind of figured out, oh, we can make wheels that slide. And as long as there's a locking system in place, it's not going to go anywhere as long as the lock doesn't break. So why don't we just do that? And it works.
Even stranger, Dylan, the Trans-European passenger trains make the translation from one gauge to the other at speed. They don't even freaking slow down.
Okay. Well, anyway, I think we're getting way off topic here.
Yeah.
I got one more question.
Railway.
I got one more question for you guys. I hear what you're saying about narrow gauge. And I understand that you're talking about ON30. But do ON3 guys talk the same way about the standards, the dimensions and so forth for ON3 as you're talking about ON30?
Generally not.
Yeah, generally not.
Generally
Bill
not.
Davis is like an exception to that rule. Just because he's Bill Davis, for lack of a better way of
They're
putting it.
more prototype, they're more locked into prototype for ON3 because it was common and because of the Colorado lines. ON30, again, because it started as kit bashers, even though there were 30-inch lines, there were not a lot of 30-inch lines in this country, but there were enough. But because the hobby started as kit bashers 15 years ago or so, it was much more loosely, no rivet counters allowed at the beginning. That kind of thing. It's my railroad, I'll do what I want. As long as I have an O-scale figure to put in there, I'm gonna run anything I want. Once you put the O-scale figure in there, you're legal.
Hey, Jim, I built a string of log cars.
Okay.
I bought the ON30 Bachmann frames and built ON3 log cars out of it. I don't know if you can see them. That's what it looks like.
Yeah,
The Bachmann frame under it.
okay.
It's I wrote an article. It was in Gazette about a year and a half ago on building that log car. But it's ON3 and it scales out to ON3 because I took the frame from the Bachmann and made those cars. Saved a lot of time building a frame.
Gotcha.
Well, let's actually keep this moving. 'Cause I
Well, that's the whole point, is to encourage dialogue. So
no, I know, but it's like we went way off track.
all right, so now do we want to head on over and see what Paul Thompson has in share to share for us tonight?
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
If I can bring the screen up, but I figure I can, and I just share screen and pull this up, I'll be able to continue. If not, this is gonna be pretty rough. Okay, let me try this first and get a screen up. So I hit the share screen.
Yep, and then you click on whatever screen it is you wanted to share.
Okay, and I just have to bring that up. And we'll start with this. If it opens, there we go. Can everybody see that?
No,
No?
Doesn't the host have to share the screen?
No,
there we got some.
Nah, participants can share. I can set it so participants can share it too.
Okay, should I try this again?
Yes.
Okay, let me just shrink everything down. So, in the little green thing below, I hit share screen.
Yep. You'll hit share screen and then a window will pop open.
Yeah,
And you'll have however many screens you have open or windows you have open, and then just click on the one you want.
that's okay.
then click share.
There we
Everybody-
go.
Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Basically, what I'm going to talk about tonight is a little bit of the power of observation and what happens when you become totally anal or possibly a rivet counter.
Hmm.
This is an HO scale mini metals truck. I believe it's mini metals. And the one on the left is the same thing. It's a little pickup. But what I wanted to kind of show everybody is what happens when you're looking at something and it just doesn't seem right to you or as realistic as you want it to be. And unfortunately, I owned one of these trucks back in the day, which is an older Ford. So first off, how do I advance this thing now? There we go.
The same way you do normally with like a right or a left
Yep.
arrow.
There we got it. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do right now is discuss the canvas back on the truck. And this is a little bit of old style modeling or being cheap or whatever you want to call it. What you're seeing in front of you is a tea bag opened up. Now, the advantages of putting a tea bag on, and this is what I did with it. I built a wire frame on the back out of basically belt telephone wire. I figured soldering was a little bit too much, so I use a product called Weld Bond, which some of you are probably familiar with, and it holds all this stuff together. I then took the tea bag, which I discovered if you get the right tea bag, now I use Stash, that's not a commercial for them, it just happened to be the right thing. And what I discovered was when it was wet, you could mold it into a certain shape. So I would wrap it over this. And then once it dried, it maintained the shape roughly, which was much better for gluing it on, etc. And I used white glue to glue this on. And then because the tea bag itself, if we go back some, you can see that it's got nice texture and whatever, but it doesn't really have any color. So I used an acrylic paint watered down to paint this. And I could never get you to show it, but if you look through the truck from the back, you can actually sort of see through, it's almost translucent. Not that that matters. So what I'm getting at on these small little trucks is to super detail something or make a neat little scene. What I was trying to do here was get a rolled up canvas where a guy would be working in the back in the summer, which was one of the observations I had because I used to work for a trucking company, and they would roll the tarp up and it would lay there. So I did this. It worked out very well. My only problem was I wanted the Canadian Pacific to show up on the side. So the tarp really, if you observe things realistically, the tarp should come down and to the bottom where the rain wouldn't get in through the slats. But I wanted to show the Canadian Pacific. So I'm not exactly pleased with this model. And to answer one of Jim's questions, no, these models aren't finished because I've got a lot to do. If you notice, I do minor little things like painting them. I don't know if you can see that all that well in this picture, but I actually paint the mirrors black coming out and then put the a dab of silver or whatever. Okay, and back to this truck. I believe this one will show you some of the stuff that I've actually done to the truck. When you first buy this thing, it's got this god-awful chrome grill. Being that I had trucks back in this era of the late 60s and early 60s, I knew that the dash particularly wasn't an all gray interior. It looked like hell to me. So I took it apart and painted the dash particularly, which was metal in those days. I painted it red. Sure, it's being anal, but when somebody actually looks at this thing from my era, they notice it. So getting back to that, we've got the all white grill. I stripped all the chrome off, and I did that with I believe you can't get it anymore, but it was a dish detergent called, or a laundry detergent called Whisk. I think they discontinued it in 2017. This is the small pickup beside it, which also I matched the color inside, and the same idea. I stripped off all the chrome. I left mirrors chrome because they would have been depending. Okay, here's the small pickup. What did I do to this thing? Well, it's still a work in progress because depending on what era I want to do this thing, I may have to put rust around here. This is basically a construction truck. And if you look at them on construction sites and use your powers of observation, you notice that rust appears on various spots. Some of these things are really badly eaten away. This would have been basically a new truck at that time. I managed to put in an antenna, which you can hardly see most of the time. And that's why the black backdrop. That was one of my ridiculous things. It's actually a toothbrush bristle. I'm relatively cheap at times. I fashioned together a pump on this tank, which this thing would have been the type of thing that would run around on the construction sites and fuel equipment. And basically, those little wee nylon gadgets that hold socks together, etc. I took one of those and managed with a little bit of heat to fashion out a bit of a pump, and there you go, on the back. Now, here's one of the things that bothers me, and why I say it's a work in progress. You can see here clearly that the dash inside the window is the right color. I painted the seat, okay. Now, I've gotten away from the all gray interior, but the steering wheel looks like hell. So if you're doing this on a foreground scene where somebody's actually going to look at it, I'd want to change that. And that's one of the things I'm working on. So, I mean, there's all kinds of minor little things you can do. There's an example of the grill. A construction truck would not have had a chrome grill. All these models come with chrome grills and they're all fancied up. That's not the way trucks looked when I was running around with these things in 1963 or 68 or whatever this thing is. So I painted the bumper black. You add a little bit of a license plate. There's no numbers on there. It's just to give you that visual impression. The more you can trick the eye into seeing something, the more the eye kind of believes that it's a little bit real, and your mind will fill in. That's my theory anyway, and I may be wrong. So there's the two side by side. It's a brief presentation. There's roughly the tea bags the way they would come after I bring the tea out of them. Then I open it up and you end up with this, and this gives you a very malleable material. I'm actually thinking of using this if I can fold it and stitch it together and use it in other scales. But in HO scale, it gives you a nice sized tarp to go in the back of a truck. I think that's basically all I've got for pictures, other than yeah, you can see I've left some things in chrome and that type of thing. So there you have it. It's just a way of being cheap. I'm using tea bags. I'm using bristles from toothbrushes. There's a lot of material around that when you look at it, it kind of inspires you to say, what can I do? And I mean, I knew some of these trucks had aerials, and it always bothered me that the thing isn't there. And that's basically what I wanted to sort of impart to everybody. You can use the realism and bring it forward with really cheap materials. I bought these trucks secondhand. So, I mean, the most expensive part of it is my time. Anyway, there you have it, gentlemen.
Love it.
Very
Nice.
cool.
Really nice, Paul.
Hey, quick question for you. You mentioned that you fit the tea bags into place first and then you glued them. Have you ever tried putting them in like a water and white glue solution?
I guess you could, but to be quite honest with you, where I first started out with this, I had a friend of mine that made this truck. Let me get back to it. This first truck that I showed you here, this one. I had a friend of mine do this. Now, he did not build the racks. Being in trucking, I knew that a truck like this had to have racks. But what he did basically was take Kleenex and put it over and make a tarp over the back. And it looked too fuzzy because, I mean, if you can imagine a fuzzy tarp in HO scale, it just didn't work to me. That's when I started looking at the tea bags. What I discovered with the tea bags is they would, if you take them and wet them, and I wrapped them around the truck and then put paper towel around them, and it would basically dry to that shape, so that all I had to do was come along and where'd they go? Just basically tack it along the sides. Okay, and that allowed the rest of it to be basically free. I rolled up this thing basically to make it look as if a driver had pushed it forward, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And at that point, then I applied a really thin wash of an acrylic tan because the tarp just didn't look the right color at this point. But I had considered using the white glue thing, but then you really kind of get into a bit of a mess because if it doesn't dry right on the first time, you really can't do much with it. Whereas this way, it's all flexible and I can just sort of push on it and hold it with a little dab of white glue.
Oh, okay.
I hope that answers that question.
I use Carpenter's wood glue, which is better, and you can sand it, paint it, and whatever you want. So and it doesn't take as long to dry as your Elmer's white.
I agree with you there. The only problem, I was actually, I think on this truck I was using Weld Bond, which dries fairly tacky too. But what you've got here is you have to be kind of careful. You want to have some flex with this thing because a tarp, to my mind, is a kind of a loose and floppy thing.
Yeah.
So you don't really want to make it stiff, rigid, and make it, I mean, I guess it's all in what you look at as being realistic.
I would just put it at the contact points to what you built for
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I agree. I can't seem to get back to the original picture that I had here. Oh, well, sorry about that,
You
guys.
also make an excellent,
I'm flipping around there a lot, but I'm looking for one particular picture to sort of, at the side of the truck, you can see there, I just kind of tack glued it along there.
Yeah.
I really would have loved to have brought the tarp down the way it was or should have been. But unfortunately, I wanted that Canadian Pacific on the side too. Those decals, by the way, I believe are Black Cat.
Paul, how'd
So-
you do the hubcaps on the pickup?
What's that?
How did you do the hubcaps on the pickup?
Strangely enough, I think they actually came that way. Which was one of the nice things on these mini metal trucks. They're not badly put off. If you can see here, you can just see a bit of the writing. You want to leave on as much as you can. I oversprayed the whole thing. Once I had it apart, of course, and the glass out, I oversprayed the whole thing with a slight bit of dull coat. Because, I mean, a truck was not glossy the way you'd see a car back then. They got dusty, they got used. And the paint faded a lot quicker on trucks than they did on cars.
Paul, you
Yeah.
can actually get little bitty decals of license plates.
Yes, I've seen them.
I don't know if I want to mess with them. They're very tiny.
I don't, if you can see here, you can just see the outline on these ones of the license plate, okay? And I don't know that actually putting numbers on them would have, I guess I could have. On the red truck, the license plate is actually yellow, which in Ontario is a temporary plate designation. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where you may be going too far into it to put on numbers, but I guess to each his own. As I say, this to me, answering Jim's question, this isn't finished because this pickup truck, I've had chains in the back. I've got shovels and brooms and stuff. You'd see an awful lot of like oil cans just thrown in the back, the way you would if this guy pulled up to fuel up a bulldozer. There'd be all kinds of stuff just thrown in the back. And that's where the next step is with this truck. But it's just one of those things that attempting to get a little bit more realism into the scene. And that's where I'm going with this thing. And it particularly bothered me when I looked at the interior of this thing. It looked like a toy because it was basically all gray. It was a really nice looking truck, but it was, you know, it just looked like a toy, and it had this horrible chrome grille, which I had to strip off. And then I painted it white because all the Ford trucks I saw back then and on the ones I owned had white grills, and they were painted.
HO scale?
That's HO scale, yes.
Yeah, the license plate numbers probably matter more in the larger scales.
That's what my thinking was. I mean, if this had been O scale, and I'm now working in P48, so I mean, doing this in P48, yeah, I'd have license plate numbers on there because it's a lot more noticeable. I have seen HO scale license plate numbers that I could probably get some painted up, I guess, but I haven't gone to that point yet because I've been working on the detail of the truck itself.
I think that's some great modeling you're doing. I really do. I've never seen anything done like that before.
It's a case, it kind of follows my philosophy that when you're doing modeling, like the same thing with weathering, I try and work from a photograph because certain things happen that when you look at them, that's the way it happens in real life, even though it's very strange. And I guess that's like when you look, one of the things that bothers me about all these little trucks, and that's my next project in HO, is to get the wheels turned. Because if you see about 10 vehicles together and all the wheels are straight, that never happens in life. And your mind starts to question it. That's my thinking.
Yep.
I did notice one thing, Paul. It looks
Yeah.
like you lowered the back of the truck a little bit to signify that there's weight in the pickup. Is that true?
Basically, when I was putting it back together, that was just kind of an accidental fit
It looked
together.
good.
These two parts come together with 2 screws, and when I put it back together, you've got a little bit of adjustment. So you can do things like that, yes.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Good. Anyway, I hope that didn't bore everybody too much. It's what I would, as I say, my next step now is to find out how to do rust around the corners like this, because every construction truck I ever saw rusted out back here.
Yeah.
But so I mean, they're not finished, but I thought it was a good start.
What are you going to do for the steering wheel, Paul?
That is a good question. I've been looking around to find. I've got another couple of small trucks and stuff, and if I find a wheel that actually looks a little better, I'm going to try and cast it or put it together that way. I'm not dead sure yet. I think I could probably get it 3D printed. That would, but there again,
Yeah.
is it worth the cost?
Yeah.
Well, I know I could get it 3D printed.
Use the SN3 brake wheel.
That's the other, I mean, you could use a brake wheel from narrow gauge, yeah, like you say. So, I mean, there's other options. At this particular point, I had put the truck back together, and then I noticed what happened. If you're looking at these 2 trucks now, a larger truck usually came with a black or dark steering wheel.
Yeah.
In the pickup trucks, they were white at that time. I think my 63 onwards, they were kind of an enameled white. So that's what I was modeling here. And when I got it back together, I realized that the white steering wheel looked large. So that'll be another thing. I'll rip that apart. And I mean, this is a lot of work for basically a small vehicle that's, no bigger than your finger. So, I mean, you have to have this in an area that's going to catch the eye. You're not going to put this at the back of the layout. That's my thinking.
Leave it alone and turn it around to face another direction. You don't see it.
That's true too. I could do that. I mean, this is a case of attempting to come up with the, like I have a couple of pickup trucks that I paid, like $50 for from Europe, and they look like they've even got the rear view mirror and hanging down inside. But you can't pay that much for every vehicle. So this is something I picked these up at a show for like $5 or $6, and then I do this to them.
Paul got a question about oil for a service truck like this.
Right.
Would they have the oil in cans, a tank, or in bottles?
Basically, you might, it could have been anything, depending on what they're servicing. But I would have thought myself, if I can get a couple of 5-gallon drums, or even throw in a 45-gallon drum with another pump on it. And that would entail a hose or whatever else. You could fill the back of this truck with individual oil cans if you wanted, because an individual guy running out with a bulldozer, I mean, he might put in 12 or 15 liters just to start up if the thing uses a lot of oil. So I mean, it's all kind of relative, and depending on what realistic situation you're looking at.
Okay, I remember gas stations back in the day had, a lot of times you buy the oil in bottles.
Yeah, that would be probably a little more prior to this. By this time in the 60s and whatever, oil cans were more more the thing you'd be buying. Now, you wouldn't find the plastic stuff we do now, but they would be actually be like a 1 quart can.
Yeah, paper can with steel top and bottom.
That would, yeah, something like that. In Canada here, we had basically, they were all tin. And sometimes you'd find like a 4 quart at that time, tin, or basically a 5-gallon can. And I mean, if you get the right size 5-gallon can, there'd be 2 or 3 of them back in there, because some of these big pieces of machinery would take 10, 15 gallons of oil.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I worked at a gas station when the paper cans were first coming out, and the contraption that we used to punch a hole had a spout on it and a punch.
Yeah.
You couldn't use it on the paper cans because the walls were thicker and you'd crush the can trying to puncture them. And then you got a mess.
Yeah, and there'd be oil all over the place. That's the other thing too. You see, like I should be having a lot of oil spills, and this tank is way too clean. But
way too clean.
Oh,
But,
way too clean.
yeah,
That whole truck should probably be black at this end of it.
various shades of black and brown. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not done yet.
Yeah, as I say, it's a work in progress, and you know, I mean, it's just one of those things where the sky's the limit, and I've got to find a good spot to stick this thing. Now, I don't know how I unshare these screens.
Go up to the top, and if you move your arrow all the way up to the top, you'll see, I think it's view options, or actually it should say something about
New share?
screen sharing.
No, there should be a red button that says stop share.
Ah, there it is. I see it. Okay. How's
There you
that?
go. All right. Well,
We're
thank
back.
you very much, Paul, and
Okay.
Paul Vaughn as well. And next up, we have Bob.
Hello. I'm gonna do this guy. Okay, you see that okay, guys?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, this is my first plastic scratch build. This is actually the second one I built of the same building. The first one I built out of plastic from the signs of a city bus. In Ontario, I don't know the states, but in Ontario, you have the bus companies have to pay people to get rid of the plastic, and 60 thou plastic, 8 feet long, 3 feet high. And so I got about 10 sheets of this stuff from the, I was living in Ottawa at the time. And so what I did is I spent 3 months cutting the windows on the sides and building the whole thing up. And it was on a January day, but -30 was the temperature. I went upstairs, it was a sunny day, and I put it on the kitchen table, a cheap plastic tablecloth on top of that, laid all the pieces down. And my wife asked me a question, and when I turned around, I knocked my bottle of Tenex 7R over. I didn't notice that, and it glued all the pieces to the plastic tablecloth. So I had to garbage it all. So this is the siding on this one, board and batten. The other ones, the battens are all cut out of the signs for the bus, and it took forever. This one here, I use evergreen siding, but the roofs are all city bus plastic, and the pipes are just brass tubes, and the pieces in through here, these are plumbing pieces, and then just piece of thin plastic, this circle around here. This is a upholstery thread, excuse me. And then up there, the eyelets are drilled into this side here in 3 spots, and that's fish hooks, the fish hooks. And then I epoxy them inside, and then I do my threading through there. And the rusting of the roof was the I think it's Builders and Scale rib seam roofing that did that thing with the Archers, or yeah, Radio Shack etchant, and rusted up the roofs. Anyway, and this one right here, this picture here, I took this picture a few months ago, and when I moved from Ottawa to Kingston, I lost that window in one of the boxes, and I finally found it about 2 months ago, and it's been on there now. And the glass in here are all real glass. There's no plastic in the windows. They're all microscope slips in here. Okay.
Nice.
Bob,
Yeah.
what scale is this
Oh,
model?
sorry, that's HO scale, sorry.
And is it a foundry
Yeah, it's
or?
supposed to be a foundry. I just, I scratch built this anyway. It's just, I made up the plans and then I just, this chimney part here is a block of wood with that siding, the plastic siding, brick looking siding. Yeah, okay.
That
That
looks
is
really nice,
amazing.
Bob.
Very nice.
Oh, get it, there we go now. Hang on.
You want to build my buildings for me?
How do you get out of there again?
Go up to the very top and
Yeah.
there will be like a red thing that says stop share.
Oh, there, right there. There you
Did
go.
solvent cement work well on that plastic?
That Tech 7R, within 4 seconds, it glued all the pieces to the plastic tablecloth. Just in about 4 or 5 seconds, and it was done. Had to start all over again. Took another 3 months cutting out the windows and everything else.
And you had to get a new tablecloth too.
Oh yeah, true. Well, I bought a cheap one to start with.
Cool. All right, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to Phil Richards.
Okay, how does this work? Okay, I'm going to try and share screen. If it doesn't, I've got the model sitting here so I can show you on this screen, but we'll try sharing.
Yep, go to share screen and then click on it. You'll have a box that opens up and then go to the window that you want and click on it.
Share. Okay. Everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay, this is the Sumter Valley Railway ballast car that's the only picture I have. And this is modeled in ON30. And I took an ON30 Bachmann underframe and kit bashed it. And this is a scratch built car here. And then here's the end part showing. I don't know if these are showing up for you or not.
They really aren't.
Yeah, we're just seeing the thumbnails.
Yeah, that's not working then. Well, I will stop sharing and I will hold the car so everyone can see it. Make it easier. All right. This is the picture that I had to scratch build this ON30 car. I don't know how good it's coming out for you or not.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the car and that's the picture. I have no dimensions whatsoever. So everything was a wild ass guess on building this car. So as we went through the process, this is the completed car according to that picture.
That's very nice.
Yeah, awesome job.
And then there's a little bit of overflow from the gravel, from the whatever. And then there's the back half. And basically there's the interior, which has been dirtied up and dusted. Now, here is here is actually the load. So this load will fit inside and all it is 40.040 scale evergreen plastic, and then white glue and gravel. It fits into the car. So I can have a empty or a completely filled car.
Nice.
That's very nice.
It's different. I mean, and then I pulled out one other car. This is a flat car, hypothetical railroad, Western Norfolk, which is who knows whatever it is. This is starting with a Bachmann ON30 underframe. Added the trucks, ON30 trucks, evergreen plastic on the sides and ends, Grant line stirrups and brake wheel, and the wood is northeastern scale lumber. That's a 3x8 piece. They are stained with Minwax, dark oak, and light oak to give you various textures on the car itself. And then they're just super glued to the plastic, because that's the only thing that's going to hold wood to plastic is super glue. For the underframe, since this is a flat, I add BBs.
Oh, nice.
So this
Yeah.
car now weighs about 4.5 to 5 ounces, so it will track outstanding with no problem whatsoever.
Fantastic.
So that's a little bit different in that respect, and that's what the car looks like overall. And then you just meander, put the wood on however you want and cut it, and it's been sliced where the stake pockets are and everything else like that. I've got one more item to show. And Dylan, you may like this. You've already seen this, but this is your engine that I put together.
I do like it.
That is, I didn't light it. I used MV lenses since I have a bunch of them from 30 to 40 years ago that no one ever has anymore. I added the engineer. I added the open doors so that you can see the engine, the motor inside. You can't see it in this, but that's plastic glass represented. But the motor controls actually have MV lenses in there to show the 4 little dots that you would have gauges on and stuff like that. And then, where in the heck is he? The engineer. Then you have the engineer sitting there with his arm out, and that's that model. And that's all I have as of right now for you gentlemen.
Hey, Phil, can I actually ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
With the junkyard dog, did you have an extra side frame in there with it?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Okay. I thought I took care of it at one point. I
Me
may
too.
not have. I may have forgotten to tell Bruce, but I had Fran tell me last night when he was going through it, hey, there's an extra side frame in here.
Yeah.
I thought I took care of that with the beta kits because I noticed some of them had extra side frames and with those.
Yeah, so you have to look at them and decide which one goes on which side.
Yeah.
To be honest
yeah,
with you, I
that-
think they could go on either side. It's just going to depend on which side has the plate around the journal is forward. You can go
Yeah,
either
that's
way.
for the
with it.
forward section. Well, if you grab the two and you put them opposite of each other, the journals with the plate there is in the back instead of the front. So you have to be careful with which two you're putting forward.
I see. So there might have been a reason that he did that.
Yeah.
That may have just been the master casting that he did. I'll double
Yeah.
check with him just to make sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if
great
it's just from
model
the
to put
if it's just from the mold, then I can
Yeah.
just pull the extra side frames. It's not a big deal. I didn't think to even check because I was more like, okay, I got to throw these parts in so we can get them out the door to everyone. I was
Yeah.
more concerned with, and if there's missing, I just looked at the bags real quick. I'm like, looks like everything's here. Okay, good. Let's throw the couplers in. Let's throw the LEDs in. Let's throw in the other trim, and let's get these out the door.
Yeah, a friend of mine also has your junkyard dog, and the funny thing is, I had him at a meeting today, and he says, "Phil, how in the hell did you get that thing built already and painted?"
To be fair, now the prototype that I built for the instructions, I mean, other than getting up to go to the bathroom, I've had that built in an hour. I haven't
Yeah.
painted it, but the actual construction didn't take that long.
No, it does not take that.
It's
The only-
beautifully simple. The best part is I didn't even need the instructions for the prototype. I just kind of looked at it and went, oh, this goes here, this goes here. Oh, this is easy.
Yeah, the only thing that I did different than your instructions on the side doors, on the side of the engine compartment, actually, I glued that first.
Okay.
And the reason being, they extend beyond the front of that unit. In other words, they stick out a minuscule amount. So if you try and put it together,
It might cause a problem.
with the front part on first, you could be off a little bit more. So you glue the two sides together, and I had, because of the material that it is, I had to use super glue to hold it. And all I did was square it up, made sure it was square. Then I added the front. Once that was dried, then I added the top.
All right. I know with the next batch, we've got proper resin cast side, hood sides for it.
Right.
Because I screwed up the side frames, and I'm like, crud, we got to get these quick. And it would have taken Bruce a while to cast them up. I'm like, well, let's just laser cut them for right now. And then I'll send Bruce a set of the laser cut ones so he can mold them. And then we could just go from there.
Well, it was a great kit. It is.
I've got nothing but good reviews on it, which is good. Tom York is the guy who deserves all the credit. He does. He designed the original. All I did is I redid the hood side frame so you can make use of the door master that he gave you.
Yeah.
That he gave me. And I redid the cab so the cab was a single piece. Because when I'm looking at the pieces that he gave me, I'm like, okay. And I showed them to Kevin, and a friend of mine, and he's like, yeah, that's going to be fiddly. And I'm like, okay, so I just measured it up. I replicated it the best I could. Obviously the original one had like a patch in the cab and like dents. And I'm like, I have no clue how to replicate that with CAD.
Yeah. Well,
so,
I've got the dents in the hood.
That's well, the top of the hood had the dents already in it. He built like he carved it from wood and then put like metal sheeting over it.
Oh.
The masters were beautiful. They were absolutely beautiful. I mean, I knew Tom was good, but oh man, is he a craftsman? Yeah. Well, he really is.
Yeah. What I had to do was actually pre-paint everything, because my interior of the cab is that smoke box gray.
I see what you mean.
And then I masked that off so it wouldn't bleed through. And then I painted the exterior the orange. And then when I went to mount the cab, I had to put all the windows in. I did that first. And then I had to add the control panel last. And that was painted a black, engine black, compared to the smoke box gray for the rest of the interior of the cab, and then mounted the Engineer.
All right. I'm glad you're happy with it. I am.
I love it.
Oh, I know. It's a simple kit. I had my concern was I want, like, the instructions are like 46 pages, and I took before and after pictures of like every step. Yeah. I did that because I'm like, I looked at Tom's instructions. Tom's instructions are good. They're 2 pages, and he gives you the drawings of the sides and the front, so you know what goes where. My thing was, let's pretend somebody has never built a locomotive to save their life. Let's make it as easy as possible. But well, yeah, what I do is I tell people, if you need the instructions, they're up on my website. You can print them off. You can save them. If somebody for some reason can't print them off, I can have a copy made at my office, and I could just mail it out to them. Not a big deal. It covers the bases.
Yeah.
But
well, I sat there with my laptop sitting there next to me, reading the instructions and doing the job as it came.
I'm glad, like I said, I'm glad you like it. I have gotten no complaints on it yet, which is good. I'm happy with that, because then I know, I know I did something right.
Well, I'm just waiting for your next project for me to get.
Oh, please. I got so much stuff on deck. It's not even funny. Wait until the W1 comes out. Biggest problem with that one is just the mechanisms, which the company that makes them said, yeah, we'll ship them UPS for you, because UPS is actually getting stuff out of where I'm ordering them from, because all my prints come from over there, and they go UPS, and they show up. Okay, if they're a day late, not a big deal. I can live with them being a day late.
Yeah, because I've got 3 of your Porter's tenders also already built. Yeah,
well, like I said, I'm glad. What I like is just, I like hearing people enjoyed it, because for me, okay, it's a business, sure, and I'm in it to make money. It's just that making the money pays for me to go out and develop more.
Well, and you're reasonably priced. You're not outlandish.
Well, that's also the other thing, is you got to be reasonably priced.
Yeah.
What I have, modelers want, it's at the same time, it's what you're giving the modeler too. You got to give them something reasonable for what they're paying for. Could I probably charge more on some things? Yeah, I probably could, but I don't necessarily have to, because 1, when you sell it, you make money on it. And 2, if you keep it affordable, people are going to come back to you anyway because they're going to go, okay, his stuff is not only good, I don't have to, burn my, take my wallet out and burn it. That's the way I look at it because maybe it's because I listened.
If you make $1, but you do it on volume, you're still making more money.
Oh, I know. Like this year has been great. I cannot complain. My second full year in and I'm doing fantastic. I love it. But what I love is basically knowing that people are enjoying what I'm building because sure, I could go out and make money and that's part of the equation. But knowing that people like you, Phil, and Fran and everyone else who has built my stuff enjoys what I'm doing, can be successful with it, and that to me is worth it.
Oh yeah.
Everyone goes, why do you charge what you charge? I'm like, well, I don't like raking people over the coals to make money. I can make money and still keep it affordable. That I learned that my grandfather drilled that into my head and my father drilled that into my head.
Well, the easiest way to figure it is if you overcharge. Let's say you overcharge and you sell only 2 units, but then you reduce that price and you sell 20, you've made more money.
Oh, absolutely. But there's also some items that people are going to pay for no matter what.
Oh, yes. Most
like
definitely.
the repower kits for the rail trucks come to mind.
Oh, yeah.
I do. They have done great. They really have. I've sold can't even remember off the top of my head. I sold enough of them where I'm like, I started printing all my labels at home and just bringing them in because I was, as much as the post office drives me nuts. It was actually yesterday. I got a locomotive that Nigel over in England built for me. And well, it looks like they ran it over with a truck or something because the frame is broken at the front and they tweaked it to one side. I'm like, that's a die-cast frame. How did you bend that?
Yeah, without breaking it.
Yeah, exactly. The shell is perfectly fine. It's just like the bottom, the frame is just like tweaked off to the driver's side. And I'm like, how? What did you hit this with? Now, I'm lucky I have another one of those mechanisms here, but I got to rewire it to get it to work. So I'm like, oh, great. I'm still flabbergasted. But I did that for the girl at the post office at the front desk because I was going in there and I'm like, I walked in there. I'm like, I'm going to have like 60 packages tomorrow. I looked there. I'm like, you are not putting postage on all of those for me because that's cruel and unusual punishment. I wasn't going to do that. So I went out and I bought a label printer and I just did the labels up here.
Yeah.
Took me like 2 hours to figure out how to do it, but I did it because, well, for one, it's just easier because then it's ready to go. I just have to put it on the table and say, hey, you guys are good to go, which is great. Instead of being in the post office for a half an hour with my packages, I'm in there for 2 minutes.
That's really true.
And it saves me a lot of time because usually when I drop stuff off at the post office, I'm on my way to work in the morning.
Well, the other thing is you're kind to the people that would be behind you when they only have one post office worker working at the counter anyway.
No, I know. She's got to still scan them in, but what's quicker? Taking the scanner, just scanning them in, or weighing them, entering the address, and then you run into the problem if I put the wrong address on there. I just pull them right from PayPal 90% of the time.
Yeah.
I did have one issue where PayPal gave me 2 addresses for one sale, and I'm like, how? How does that work?
We had that the other day with my son's golf ball business, used golf balls. This guy in California had 3 addresses.
Now, luckily, I was already talking to the guy who I had the issue with anyway. And I'm like, hey, can I just confirm your address? PayPal's being weird again. And it's giving me like 2 addresses in the same town. So I'm like, they're not the same house. I know they're not. They're 2 different streets. So I'm like, where do I send?
Yeah, with us,
make sure it gets to you.
Yeah, it was a work address, a shipping address, and a billing address. And they were all different.
Oh, I know. Don't get me wrong. I'm used to having. No, I know. And he was fine. He just is like 2 minutes later, he's emailing me back. Yep, this is the address. Okay, great. It's shipping is weird. I mean, like right now, if I was to walk into the post office, they technically can't send it first class. Technically. quote unquote. I can go through the label maker on the computer and I can still send it first class by there. And they have to accept it. But what I found is I sent out a few packages first class right at the start of COVID, and some of them went on wild trips across the country.
Yeah.
This is before I even sent out the repower kits, and I picked up on it because I went back and looked when I was having trouble with the repower kits. They went on trips that were even worse than some of the first repower kits that went out the door. And I'm like, I even walked into the post office and I said, "What do these boxes look like when they come back to you?" And they're like, they didn't even know why they were coming back. They honestly didn't. And they're like, unless it's the machine reading the label and reading your return address on here for some reason and saying that's the ship to. Because when the post office got them back, they're like, usually there would be a code in the system that says why it went back to the post office, that it originated from. And like, there's nothing in the system. Best one was I had like 10 of them that made it to their destination towns, and one of them even went out for delivery and it got brought back and sent all the way back to Leicester. I'm like, how? Why? What did I do to deserve this? Better yet, what did my customers do to deserve that? I think I was more upset than most of my customers because, they were. I think I say it once and I'll say it again. I've got some of the best customers in the world because they're just. They're good. They're patient. They give me ideas. If I mention I was thinking of something and I can't find a set of drawings, they'll go out looking for drawings for me. My customers are awesome. They are. And I wouldn't have it any other way. 3 years ago, I was a nobody in the grand scheme of things. I mean, Dylan Lambert, whoever heard of him? Now I've got people like Larry Knapp that I know, Fran, Al Judy. I mean, there's Alan Littlefield. He was one of the first I met, and he was just great to me right from the start. Part of this, the other intrinsic value to this is the people you meet. And I'll tell you what, I have met some damn good people. That, frankly, that if I had met them at any other time, I'd always be. They may have been great to me, but these guys looked at me and they treated me like a human being from day one. And for me, that's good because, I had a period in my life about 10 years ago, I kept getting burned like bad. You go with 4 funerals in a month and, of people that you were related to and people who were your mentors, that burns. And then you have people that and trust stabbing you in the back. I mean, like, not even just like, oh, they kind of jab you. Oh, I mean, knife in the back. Oh my God. It was bad. I look at where I am now and I even look at the guys in the Zoom call because think about it. How many of you guys, even Jim, you would have probably never have met me if I didn't do what I do.
That's true.
You'd be like, Dylan Lambert, who's that?
Exactly.
And that's, to me, it's also got me to a point where I'm willing to trust people again. Because, when you go through what I went through, and I'm not going to bore you with a sob story, I had trust issues because I was afraid of what I could lose. And, well, thank God I got over it because look at what I've gained. I got people on this Zoom call who know me, people who are just meeting me, people who are willing to put their faith in me. And that is worth it.
And you get all the knowledge also.
Oh, absolutely. And the best part is people will pepper me with ideas, suggestions. I'll stay up at night thinking of things, and I could guarantee you I could go to any one of these guys that know me, whether it be Littlefield, whether it be Carol, whether it be, Maycomber, Judy, whether it be to Larry, Fran. If I went to them and said, they'd probably point me in the right direction. Or alternatively, they give me a bunch of ideas. And then I'm sitting up at night going, okay, how do I make that work? Because that's great.
I can attest to the fact that he is up late at night.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I'm-
that's you.
I
Well,
get
yeah,
that
when you
time
call
zone.
me and it's like 10:30, it's like and I'm laying down in bed. Come on.
Yeah, but you still talk to me. I don't
Well, yeah,
understand.
because
I'm trying to
because
let
I'm
you go.
to be fair, I try to be a nice person. I try to be courteous. If you're calling me for a reason. That's the way I
Yeah,
look at
I'm
it.
just bored.
Yeah, but that's also a reason, to be fair. I mean, I try to be good to people because people are good to me. And you never know when you might need the help, or you never know when you might need somebody to lean on.
Listen, do we have anybody else that wants to share a model with us tonight?
Well, I do have something. I actually do. Let me pull it up. So, oh, hold on. Give me a second. I got to find the picture that I took. And then I'll run you guys down the problems I'm running into with it.
This little thing
Where is it?
Paul
I know-
sent to me. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
I was going to make an army engine out of it for SN2. And then I measured the drivers. Darn it.
They're too tiny, aren't they?
No, they're too big.
They're too big.
Yeah. They're 1/2 inch across.
Ah.
See this?
It keeps disappearing.
My background. Time to kill the background. Okay. Now can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. There was 2 of these on the Uinta 062s.
Oh, I know the
Tank
ones you're talking about. They used them for passenger service, I think.
Yep. Dang near perfect. The drivers are spot on, but they're 2 inches too small. Since I don't model the Uinta, I don't care.
At
So
the
now-
same time, 2 inches in scale. Well, think about it. It's if it was a foot off, I think most people would pick up on that. I don't think most people are going to pick up on 2 inches.
What scale is it?
It's an HO scale 060, and it's going to be an S scale 062. I want to
Okay.
get new domes and stuff. I don't know what I'm going to do for a cab yet. Another guy who did a similar one used, oh shoot. Paul,
Yeah, I know
what's that guy's name that does the,
That's Calvin. That's Calvin Witt and Scott Mays. I know who you're talking about. The Kit Bash brothers is what they call themselves.
anyway,
Yes.
huh?
I thought I heard somebody go to say something, but
I just said yes to your comment. They are the Kit Bash brothers.
Anyway, still haven't figured out about a cab, but new domes and lights and everything, of course, because changing scales. But once I get the cab figured out, I'll probably build this in, maybe a couple of years. Take me that long.
Well,
Now,
What are you gonna make?
work
What are you
at it.
gonna make the? What are you gonna make the cab out of?
I might do a wood cab, but the prototype was steel. So probably if I can't find a good cab, maybe I can talk Dylan into catting me one.
Get me
My
the metal.
cat skills are no good.
We could step into my office. We'll see what we can do.
We're not going to take these guys' time.
Okay, but let me show you guys this little thing I picked up. So I've shown some of you guys pictures of this, but not everyone who was in here has probably seen it. You might have heard me talking about it. So this is a Chemtron O-scale 2 rail Wabash Mogul, right? Now, I will grant you the paint job is a little bit hideous. I was gonna actually have a friend of mine repaint the smoke box gray because I'm like, blue? Ew. I actually got this, and I'm going to leave the paint job alone because as I'm looking at it, whoever actually did this, it may have been, a 40-year-old paint job, who knows? Whoever actually did this did a very, very good job with this paint job. You look at this this red lining here. Not only does that look like it's done by hand because I can see little brush marks in it, there's no splotches of red on like the tops or the bottoms that doesn't line up with the edges. It is beautiful. All the the screw heads on the running gear, he's painted all those. The running gear pieces were all painted separately. The individual parts look like they're all painted separately. Like whoever did this knew what they were doing for the most part. Now, why do I say the most part? I ran into I go out to my buddy Dan's house to test run it. Go to put the tender on the tracks, and all of a sudden the wheel falls out of the tender. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Maybe I twisted the truck too far, because it's just a brass bolster with 2 screws into the side to hold the truck side frames on. I'm like, okay. Then it falls out again. And a third time. And a fourth time. I'm like, okay, something's wrong here. I look at the tender, and there's so much play side to side in these wheels. They're falling out when the trucks are straight. Or more or less straight. As the truck side frames flex, the wheels just fall right out. One side of it falls right out of the journal. I'm like, okay, let's at least get this to stay put for the most part so I can check the mechanism and make sure it works. Now, the mechanism runs smoothly. A little bit noisy, but hey, what do you expect from 1960s motors and gearing? It is what it is. But whoever put this together, there was only one problem. Somebody looks like they took the tender shell off and put it back on. And when they did, they caught the cut bar for the rear coupler and they mangled it. So I ended up taking it off for right now. I could probably make another one because it's just wire. But that can wait. The goal right now is, one, I need to make 2 new bolsters that are narrower for the rear trucks, so that way the wheels don't fall out, because that's kind of a problem because here's the problem. Those trucks are part of the stock electrical circuit. So one side of the electrical connection is the front drivers. The other side of it is the tender trucks. So if I don't fix that, what's going to happen is this thing's not going to run reliably. And there is a point to this. Now, I'm going to share with you all my vision of brass. Just because it's brass does not mean it needs to run like crap. I have heard many people over the years say, oh, the old brass sucks, blah, 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 blah. I've heard it all. Dan especially, he does not like brass. I suspect it might be because of his few experiences with brass. They didn't run the best. That is what it is. My point is, I believe you can make brass run well. Do you have to put in the effort in some cases? Absolutely. Not everything is an all-nation 10-wheeler that runs like a Swiss watch. This is a Chemtron. These were great for detail. And a little bit funky on the running, I guess. I've heard reports that's from people who've run them say, on one hand, these run awesome. I've heard other people say, yeah, they take a little bit of fine tuning. Okay, it is what it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fix the tender trucks and make sure this thing runs smoothly and reliably. That is phase 1. Phase 2, I need a professional for, because as I was talking to said professional, Jay Criswell, he's just like, look, I screwed these up when I first did this. You'll probably make some pretty serious mistakes. Not the first brass locomotive mechanism I fiddled with, but he probably brings up a good point. So my hope is that when he does this, I'm going to have Jay Criswell do the mechanism. Basically do it over, put a can motor with a flywheel in it and a gearbox. Because while this runs smoothly, for the most part, when there's an electrical contact right now, and the circuit is complete, it has 2 speeds, stop and go. I think we will all agree that stop and go, as well as that can be reliable, 50 scale miles an hour around a hairpin curve is probably not going to be good for anyone's health.
Not the locomotive's health anyway.
Well, this thing can go through the curves on Dan's layout very well. I know Bob Jelland had mentioned that some of these are supposedly kind of particular about track work. So not a big deal, easy fix. Like I said, I got it to run through the sharpest curves on Dan's layout and ran fine. My goal here is to basically be able to say, Dan, or when Dan is doing an open house, whenever we can do those again, Dan, let's run the mogul, or just run the mogul and not tell Dan when he's not looking. So then when it goes by, he's going, oh, I don't remember putting that there. Oh, that's running pretty good. So I could just say, Dan, you can make brass that runs good. You just got to fiddle with it, which I agree. You shouldn't have to fiddle with a model, but you know something, for the detail, what it is, if I got to fiddle with it a little bit to get her to work right, or better than right as she is now, I'm willing to do that. Because, and I am going to leave the paint alone, as ugly as the paint is. A blue smoke box. Come on, what is this? I mean, even the British didn't do blue smoke boxes. That's just kind of, I can't think of anyone who painted a smoke box blue unless it was like a streamliner. And they just gave the whole casing a whole paint job. I can't think of anyone who did that. So the paint job's going to stay put because I don't want to throw that work away. Because I would love to figure out who painted this. I don't think I ever will, but I'd love to figure out whoever did this, so I can say, hey, this was fantastic work. You should really be proud of this, because it is. The paint job is fantastic. Like I said, it's probably 40 years old. There's a few little nicks and scratches here and there. You know, the cylinder edges are a little bit scuffed, but it is a truly beautiful locomotive. I know I'll get it running smoothly, and then I'll be able to look at Dan and go, want to see me do it again? Because I do believe it can be done. It's just, you got to work at it. And of course, when a professional tells you it's probably not a good idea for you to tackle it, listen to the professional and go, okay, can you do it for me?
Yeah, just be thankful you're not dealing with HON2 brass.
Oh, I know, because it's even tight. I've got an ON2 brass locomotive that I'm having converted to ON30. It's a model of Sandy River number 6, or it started out as Sandy River number 5, then it was Sandy River and Rangeley Lakes number 6, then it was Kennebec Central number 4. Basically, it went all over the place in Maine because, hey, it was available when somebody needed it. And I gave it to Terry Van Winkle to convert to ON30. And I did have somebody, when I first posted the picture of it, I'm like, this is great. It's going to be converted to ON30. And he's like, why convert it? I'm like, because I can. Yeah. I just went right to Terry and just said, you're the brass expert. Look, I could care less if this is a $3,000 project to do. I don't think it's going to be nearly that expensive. But point is, you know what you're doing. I'd rather it be done right. Let's just give it to you and let you do your thing. So I know he is waiting on the cylinder casting to come back because he had to make a new cylinder set casting that was wider. You know, I know he's got to reinforce the pilot because what he found on a lot of the ON2 versions that he had that he didn't even convert, I guess those pilots are weak, and mine was actually broken when I got it. Just a solder joint. It's such a thin joint where the pilot would join that I guess it just would break very easily. And of course, because it's such a small locomotive, Terry's like, yeah, I'll have to reinforce that. Okay. You do what you have to do so it runs right, runs well, and then, well, money's not the issue right there. The issue is so it's done right. And so I could say, I have a small Forney. I have a Portland Company Forney in ON30. Was it expensive? Absolutely. But it exists.
Well, the ON30 Forney is definitely not as small as those little Portland.
Oh, no, it is not. It is probably, what, twice the size of this one?
Yeah.
Easily. Not that those engines are bad. The Bachmann ones run great, but they're just a little bit too big for what I think a Forney should be. Not to say they didn't make big Forneys. They did. Sandy River is a perfect example. They had ones that were basically gigantic. I think it's Bridgeton and Saco River number 8, I think technically was the biggest. I think. I'd have to double check the spec sheets.
But the Alcos that were built
Either that or it's the biggest survivor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Point is I want to be able to say, hey, I have a small Forney. I want to be able to run it on Al Judy's layout so he can take pictures of it. I can say, ooh, that's mine. Because reasons. And look, anyone who has seen the area that I use, that I sleep in and I use for my inventory storage will probably be able to know, yeah, I don't have room for a layout here. Not unless somebody moves out. It's renting a room from my parents because that was cheaper. And,
So Philip, you want some masochism that you can do for your next model?
Sure, go ahead.
Take your MV lenses.
Yes.
And your tiniest drill.
That's an 80.
Okay.
Which
Put
I
a
put
little,
many of.
yeah. Put a little bitty hole in the back of the silver backing.
Yes.
And then now here's the masochism part. Get the tiniest little 0201 LED.
I'm listening.
And that's your bulb.
Well, you know what? I like building everything, but I hate electronics.
You're not the only one that hates electronics. I hate electronics. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy wiring. I don't enjoy it when a decoder I put in that is running fine for a few minutes as I'm testing it on the rollers spontaneously bursts into flame.
Yeah.
I never figured out what happened to that one, and that's the only locomotive I've done for a customer that I threw DCC and sounded. I had somebody come to me and ask, hey, would you be willing to throw Keep Alive in a Porter for me? I'm like, no, because the last decoder job was such a mess. Look, until I learn more that I could say, and to have the time, because the biggest, I work, 50 hours a week. And I do this, and I do the Zoom calls. Right.
Well, that's why your junkyard dog gave me all that wonderful electronic stuff to put the power in. And then I started looking at it and I said, now, how is this going to get wired to the motor or the trolley motor on the chassis?
Well, what's helpful with the trolley motor,
it's on top of it.
You'd have to drill holes. You'd have to pre-drill holes, and you'd have to wait to mount the couplers because the couplers hold that mechanism in place. Even I looked at it, I'm like, you know what? It's better to let somebody who has a better understanding of the electronics figure that out. I can give you some pointers and say, hey, there are tabs on top of the trolley block that you can solder to. But I'm also not the electronics expert. I can know the basics of how to set up the LEDs. And I don't want to steer somebody wrong either. Yeah. I want them to be successful. So I could give them some pointers and just say, you got to figure the rest out on your own. And that's nothing personal. I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction. And then you have a decoder catching fire and then I'm getting an angry phone call.
Well, the thing is, if you've got an engine sitting on the side of a track, the lights aren't on. So this is
true.
So that's the way I figure the light isn't on, and the MV lenses for this engine worked out perfectly okay. Now the other ones that do light is fine. But that's why I just build freight cars and passenger cars. I've gone through every single manufacturer for converting Bachmann cars into whoever. And I just enjoy building. I don't have a layout anymore. I don't want to build a layout anymore. I used to have a very nice HO layout, but now I just like building. I'm retired, so I got all the time in the world to build projects.
See, that's basically, I've had some people say, why don't you have a layout? Well, space is an issue. What was going to be my layout is my storage shelf for all my inventory and my parts and my prototypes. It had to happen. I wanted to keep it all in one place instead of, all over the house. It's like, hey, I rent a room. It's not my, it's not like I own the whole house and I can put stuff everywhere. Even though my father has already said, look, we're building a garage eventually at this point. It was going to happen this year, but then it didn't. And we built an outdoor kitchen instead, which is a whole nother story. But he's already told me, look, when the garage goes up, I'll give you space in there because the garage is going to be, the size of the house and possibly be 2 stories. So he's already told me, look, you'll get some space in there. I don't know what the space is going to look like, but he's already said, hey, you'll get space in there so you have room for all your stuff. Now, I could probably use that space at that point to build a layout of my own and just keep the inventory down here. Or if I get to the point where I've got so much stuff that I need the inventory space, I'll use it for inventory space. It's not a big deal.
Well, the way I look at it, I'm a mature individual and I have the space, but I just don't want to put the time in for it anymore.
It's not that I don't want to put the time into a layout, but what I have found is I enjoy the designing. I enjoy the challenge of figuring something out. I really do. And that, for me, that to me is rewarding, especially when I see somebody else build something that I've designed and they've done it successfully. You know, that to me is the reward. And like I said, I just enjoy the designing. And oh, my brother's sending me stuff. He's sending me more stuff on Vans.
Philip,
Yes, sir.
are you the one that had the Sumner Valley ballast car?
Yes.
Would you like to see what it looks like today?
Yeah, if I certainly would.
Okay, let me screen share. Did that come up?
That's it. Yeah, that's number 550 on the ballast, and she's pretty well toast.
That is built on a truck frame.
Oh, really?
Really, that frame runs from here to there. It's on a regular truck frame.
Huh. Nice. Yeah, that's the only.
Now.
Yeah, that's the only picture that I could ever find, and I found it by accident. And I thought, I can build that car without any dimensions or how big it's supposed to be. So I just went on what would be appropriate.
It's a nice model. It really is. You did a beautiful job with it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close it.
Yeah, that's good though. Thank you. Yeah, I most likely have somewhere in the vicinity of close to 100 scratch-built cars and another 100 or so kit-bashed cars in ON30 since I decided to get out of HO because my fingers got fatter and my eyes got worse.
That's what they make optimizers for.
Well, I got those too, but that doesn't matter.
I will say this about Phil. Very recently, me and him have kind of tossed stuff back and forth. But when I first got into ON30, his scratch building is what I saw. Now, I didn't know it was scratch building at the time. I'm just looking at the pictures like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then you just keep seeing all these unique models of it. And then you figure it. And then once I figured it out, I think you built something on a GG1, I think.
Yeah.
That's where I kind of like, oh, he's scratch building all this? Because I was just kind of scrolling through Facebook, saw it. I'm like, ooh, that's nice.
Yeah, but well, that's no longer here.
I will tell you what. I mean, that was around the time I started getting, thinking, wait, I could do this. I could design kits and locomotives. How hard can it be? Now, not necessarily difficult, but a little bit crazy to do it.
Well, I'm going to let you guys go. I've got.
Well, nice meeting you and talking to you, and thank you for the last photo. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Paul.
Yeah.
Dylan, who had the picture of the articulated critter?
Articulated critter. That was Paul.
Was it?
Yeah, I think the rail bus you're talking about.
I don't know whether it was a rail bus. I forget. It was the greatest little model I've ever seen, I think.
Articulated. We'd have to actually. No, was it here tonight?
No. It was either last time or the time before.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
They were going to send you a photo of it.
I have to look and see if I got the picture somewhere. If they sent me the photo, I may have it saved.
Okay.
But I'm something feels familiar about that.
Well, I have to go.
I've enjoyed the meeting and I will join other ones when they come up, whenever. I
Oh, that's
appreciate
great.
time.
Well, we're here every Wednesday and Saturday, so anytime.
Oh, so on Saturday, yeah, I tried to get in on Saturdays on the 24th. I said, well, that won't work. I'm not even here yet.
Yeah, yeah. No, I sent out the wrong link earlier. That's my screw up. I didn't even catch it until somebody emailed me and goes, "Hey, this is the link for Saturday," and I'm like, "Oh, whoops!" Because the first thing I did before I sent the links out is I set the meeting up for Saturday. It's the first thing I did, and I must have copied the link from there by accident. That's what I'm thinking I did.
Well, gentlemen, enjoyed and thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening and we'll talk to you again.
You too. Thank you so much. And so next Saturday, by the way, Doug Coster is going to join us as the feature modeler. Doug's been on the show before. He lives in Hong Kong. He models Japanese short line railroads, and he's a fantastic modeler and does an awful lot of detail in his modeling. So hope you'll come back and join us then. And unless anybody's got anything else, thank you so much for coming and look forward to seeing you Saturday.